The time of the judges. Like I said, kind of a unique time period in world history. So far in this course, we've talked about several different approaches to structure, several different types of government. We talked about dictatorships towards the start of class when we talked about start of the semester when we talked about ancient riverine civilizations. Well, that's one approach to having a form of government, just having one person or at best a group of people, small group of people, in charge of everything. We've talked about democracy when we talked about ancient Athens. That's another approach to a form of government. You'll remember we talked about a republic when we talked about ancient Rome. You might even remember Plato's republic, that imaginary form of government that Plato thought about with a benevolent dictator, a philosopher king. Well, here we have yet another approach to government, which is not to have one at all. No political structure at all. Well, it's another approach to government, just not have one. There's no king, no court system, no legislature, no police officers, no laws in the sense of speed limit laws. There aren't those kind of laws. Now, there are moral laws. There are laws about how you treat people in society. There are laws about how you behave. There are moral laws. There are religious laws and ritual laws about how to make the sacrifices, animal sacrifices for the Hebrew people, how to make the sacrifices right, how to go through certain ritual washings at certain times of life, what kind of food you can eat and what kind of food you can't eat, those kind of laws. But there's no kind of laws like don't tear the tag off the mattress kind of laws. There aren't any of those kind of laws. Instead, the phrase that you hear over and over again as you read the book of the Judges, and now we move to the seventh book in the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, over and over again in the book of Judges you hear the phrase, everybody did what they thought was right. Everybody did what they thought was right. It's an interesting political theory. The idea seems to be that if you teach children how to behave, if you teach children how to behave in society, how to treat people, and then when they grow up, if they just do what they think is right, then, you don't need a police officer on every street corner. You don't need a whole small claims court system to deal with petty disputes because, everybody will do what they think is right. You don't need a speed limit law saying that you can't drive faster than 35 miles per hour in a residential area because, of course, if you do what you think is right, and if you're driving a car and you get close to a bunch of houses, well, of course you're going to slow down. Because children live in places where there are lots of houses, some kids might be playing, some kid might come running out in the street, and so of course you're going to slow down. You don't need some kind of law telling you to do that because you're going to do what you think is right. It's an interesting political system. But as you can imagine, it wasn't particularly effective. Not a very efficient and effective system of government. You can pretty quickly begin to see some shortfalls and some shortcomings with that approach to setting up a political structure. You can very quickly come up with some problems. And in fact, if you do read the book of Judges, by the end of the book, that refrain, everybody did what they thought was right, becomes very bitter and sarcastic because the writer will describe horrible, absolutely horrible things going on and then say everybody did what they thought was right. It becomes very bitter. As social conditions deteriorate, absolutely horrible things happen, and the other writer says, see, everybody did what they thought was right. It becomes very bitter and sarcastic. And, as you can quickly figure out, sometimes it's kind of nice to have a government. Especially, for example, when the bad guys show up, when the bad guys invade. The bad guys invade, they're running around the countryside, burning stuff, stealing stuff, and the people have to wait. They have to wait for somebody to stand up and say, I'm anointed to be a judge. Somebody stands up and says, I'm anointed to be a judge. Now, two things about what I just said. First, the first one kind of important, the second one very important. The first one, which is kind of important, is the use of the word judge here. As I mentioned to you earlier, oftentimes in the story, as the story's been told and retold over and over and over again for thousands of years in Western culture, old-fashioned words have gotten stuck to the story. And here we've got an old-fashioned use of the word judge here. This use of the word judge just simply means any leader who's authorized to make decisions, who has the authority to make decisions. It just means a leader with authority. Today we limit that word judge. We tend to think about somebody in a courtroom